How's it going, everybody? It's the CDH Warrior, and
I'm Greg Monday. I'm the CDH Warrior's dad, and we're working on an extension of the progress that Drew has been making with his CDH Warrior video series. So, Drew, I'll let you do the introduction.
so this is going to be a new podcast series called Monday's Monday. We're going to take and do questions. This is just kind of our introductory episode, trying to introduce you all to who we are, trying to get you familiar with everything that's going on, and kind of to do a big kickoff for this. I set this kind of my third channel up to do as a podcast for my dad and I, as well as to pull a separate series that I've been trying to work on, and it will be on Fridays, focusing purely on what we as CDH survivors go through. But let's jump in to Monday's Monday. Okay.
Ready? Hi. I first want to start off with just kind of a disclaimer. Neither one of us are medical professionals. Neither one of us are psychologists or sociologists. We do not have the professional background there. But what we do have is a lot of experience in real life situations. I want to give you some just background. Many of you are probably familiar with the CDH Warrior, my son, and we went through quite a bit of trials and tribulations with him in his early days, almost 28 years ago, when we didn't find out until his birth that he was CDH, and he had to go through surgeries at birth at one hospital, surgery at another hospital, transfer to a third hospital, and additional surgeries there. So quite a bit of the trials and tribulations from that. Also know that many families that are dealing with the CDH community, you have to deal with that experience with a child, and then you also have to be concerned about what are the long-term effects on the family, future children, those type of situations. In our situation, we did some studies at his birth and after his birth, and we did not find any genetic anomalies that would be a precursor to leading to CDH. So we had a child 2 years later. Everything was perfectly normal until she was about 1.5 years old, at which case she contracted a totally unrelated condition called aplastic anemia. You can look this up and we'll discuss some of this in detail as we go further, but this led to the need for having a stem cell transplant, which is basically a bone marrow transplant, and chemo, radiation, a lot of those aspects of life. And then her situation recovery there. So my wife and I spent many years dealing with not only the birth and the health issues with our children when they were young, but also the developmental issues and the physical and occupational therapy required over a long term to help them in their development and help them to grow into healthy and productive and successful adults. So as Drew has said, what we're wanting to do is just kind of start a discussion session here. This is more of an introduction. The first go around, we don't have any questions and things to go on. We're kind of going to be playing this by ear, and just start the introduction, start letting you know who we are. There will be an email address available. Mondays on Monday 4. And then from that, you can be able to contact us with any questions, comments, suggestions, and we would appreciate that.
Just to go back over that email is Mondays on Monday 4 at gmail.com. I run that account along with my dad, so we'll check pretty much every couple of days uh, to pull questions and decide what we're going to answer. And if we don't get to your question one week, we will turn around and answer your questions the following week. So just because you don't get an answer from us on your question the week that you ask it, doesn't mean we're not going to answer it. It just means we got a ton of questions and we're having to look at uh, avoiding having an hour-long episode.
Yes, our general hope is to keep this to about a half-hour session. Keep it to where people can kind of listen in, track in, get bits and pieces of information that are helpful to them and help them in their journey with their child and development. And also hopefully get some feedback from some survivors with CDH, aplastic anemia, bone marrow transplant, graft versus host disease, a lot of other anomalies, and kind of get those where we can answer questions.
Yeah.
Part of my interaction with the help of Facebook is that I'm on several boards that on Facebook sites that questions can be asked, and that provides me an opportunity to do some private messaging with some people, but we felt it might be best if we set this up to where it was more of an open and video opportunity to communicate with a larger group and hopefully be able to be helpful to people in the long run. The other thing is that we're not doing this for any monetary purpose. This is more just as a service and support for other folks who are going through similar type situations.
It's one I kind of threw this idea out. My dad and I both kind of threw this idea out, 2 weeks ago?
It's been rattling around for
several months,
but really
about
we
2
started
weeks ago,
working on the details in just the last few weeks.
But it's one I've kind of wanted to do a podcast series on CDH anyway, because it's one I've been through so much just in my general day-to-day life, and there's so little information, and I don't want to state there's so much misinformation, because that's not quite accurate. It's just the fact that there's not much information, so we're kind of having to fill in the blanks of everything. But it's one I had kind of started a while back trying to decide on doing a series that I called We Survived This, Now What?, which was going over every week we'd go through and decide, looking at something that we as CDH survivors go through on a day-to-day basis, and trying to look at the recovery and the questions of literally the question that is asked in the title. We survived this? Now what do we do?
And to tie in with that, and part of the reason we've collectively chosen to work on this is I have insight into other parts of the aspects of this, which is, how do you handle juggling the work-life balance when you've got a child in the hospital or in heavy medical requirements and juggling back and forth on that? How do you handle some of the transport and issues there? How do you handle just normal life in an abnormal type situation? And we've had the experience to go through this not once but twice in two totally different situations. And in both cases, we were dealing with the potential with the death of a child. So those aspects are things that I can help people at least give you some of my experience and what I went through. Just to explain, I've been very fortunate. I've had a good career through the years, and I've had employers who were, in most cases, helpful and supportive in the endeavors that we dealt with. But there were a lot of bumps along the road, a lot of issues and things that we had to deal with, and those have impact. It's also a matter of the the long-term effects that it has. Uh, as far as parents, uh, it's very similar to PTSD type symptoms.
So
Is you're going through a traumatic situation with a child that you may lose. It is a very taxing personal situation, and how do you deal with that? How do you deal with aspects with questions and comments from people outside the community who really don't understand what you are dealing with, and understanding that in cases with CDHD, it's what, 1 in 2,800 capability.
one in
CDH is
1 in 2,500.
Roughly
But
1 in 2,500,
odds-
and then you've got about a 50% chance of survival. So it's a 1 in 5,000 that you're going to be dealing with a child that's dealing with that type of situation. So it's,
And I want to touch on something. So I'm 1 in 2,500. That's the average for everything internationally. But it's the odds of somebody with with idiopathic CDH, no known genetic cause, is officially debated to be 1 in 4,000. The 1 in 2,500 comes when you add all the cases of CDH together. The other thing that I want to point out is this is an alarming stat to me, because I've been through multiple groups and seen that the stat is semi-accurate. But I want this to stick in your head. 50%. That is the survival rate for CDH. Think about that. 1 in 2 that are diagnosed survive.
and that's one from a parent standpoint is difficult, because we knew nothing about CDH when Drew was born until after his birth, when it was found that he did have the CDH. And in the discussions that we had very soon after that, it was a 30 to 50% chance of survival with that. And there have been some improvements in the treatment protocols that are used since that time. Drew was part of some of those in the early phases, and we were familiar with those. There are other doctors and facilities that are using similar type situations. But it's also one now that CDH is diagnosed and addressed much sooner in the pregnancy process. Even though we went through ultrasounds and amniocentesis and a lot of the testing, it was not known that he was CDH until at birth. So, that was a difficult situation. Now, from what I see, a lot of this is diagnosed in the 20 to 25, 28 week span in the pregnancy. So parents have much more time to prepare for what is coming. It's also one doctors have a chance to better prepare on the protocols that are going to be used.
Yeah.
And you know more about the numbers and the dynamics of that than I will.
I think we're going to end up moving to a new location, folks, because it has decided it's going to pour. So give us 1 second and we'll be back. Sorry about that, folks. We had to move from the rain.
It's much better to be in the dry right now. But it's also one I wanted to bring up some aspects, because as we talk, Drew and I, we're being familiar with the situation. We may use terms that sometimes you may say, well, what does that mean? One of the expressions we learned early in the experience is, if you're looking for doctors, pediatricians, people to work with you in the journey that you're dealing with in the health situation, is you're looking for doctors that, as we describe it, if they hear hoofbeats, they start looking for zebras and not horses. And that's the aspect of most doctors are trained for normal children, diseases, issues, concerns.
Yeah.
Many times, if you've got a CDH child or some other type anomaly, uh, there are outstanding issues that you really need to have a doctor evaluate. Uh, just as a personal aspect of this, when my daughter was uh, first presented with,
Aplastic anemia?
with
Oh.
conditions of aplastic anemia, some issues that were some bruising and stiffness of the joints and things like that, which is with a 1.5-year-old is difficult to diagnose. She had been to the doctor and her regular pediatrician within the past week. In our case, we were fortunate that there was a woman who lived behind us who was also a pediatrician, doctor, and head of the state medical healthcare system, and had put together some emergency room pediatrics program. And my wife went out, called the doctor, said, can you just take a look and see what you think? She was just doing a normal Saturday morning walk. And the doctor said, yeah, this doesn't look quite right. Why don't you bring her in to see me tomorrow? I'll be at the emergency room working on pediatric emergency care. And that was where we were fortunate to be able to have that type situation with a doctor. In many cases, you may not have those type resources available. But it's also a matter of when we moved, we made a point to find a doctor who was a pediatrician who had previously worked in emergency situations and in severe childhood health care. So it was a doctor who had experience with those things, but really wanted to get into a normal practice. Yeah. So sometimes those are aspects of things that you need to work with. It's also a matter of getting to know nurses, therapists, others who are working in the field, because they may have insights and be able to help in some aspects of that. So I'm just trying to provide some feedback of things that we may be talking about as we go through this journey with the Mondays on Monday, and talking about a lot of the child healthcare issues and the family issues associated.
Yeah, definitely. I don't really know what else to add to it. I pretty much do my own, deal with my own stuff, and I end up talking quite a bit, so I pretty much talk myself out over the course of a week.
And that's one, just kind of giving some additional background on where we're looking at is, we really want you to be able to utilize the website or the email address that we're going to provide, so that you can be in contact with us. And over time, hopefully we can develop questions and contacts and resources that can help for the long term.
And for those that are wondering, I will put the email address and all the information down in the description of the video. This will also be posted. I'm going to post it on my public Facebook page so people can find it as well, and I'm going to pin it as a top post.
And as a sidelight to that, I've had a lengthy career, and I've got a pretty good site on LinkedIn that I use. So I'm going to put a link within LinkedIn on this, so that you'll be able to utilize that as a way to contact, because sometimes you can email, but sometimes you can also message on some of those services, as in Facebook or LinkedIn or something like that, and be able to make those contacts. Yeah. It's also those help into be able to get into a little broader audience.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd like to make available is, as people listen in, is if you've got medical professionals or persons along those lines who are familiar with CDH or some of the other childhood anomalies we may be talking about, is be willing to provide your input and resources and assistance in helping us to provide support for people.
Yeah.
And as we said, we are not medical professionals. We are not psychologists. We're not sociologists. We're not here to provide
We're not
technical
here to,
support in
we're not,
this.
yeah. We're not here to diagnose. We're just here to give you what we've experienced.
Yeah. And it's one, in many cases, there's not necessarily a right answer or a wrong answer. But the most critical part is, in particular for families that are going through this, is to be able to make use of the resources you have available and utilize a lot of techniques that you go through. Keeping a notebook with you in the hospital. Anytime you get medical reports, lab results, anything like that, when those go in, ask the nurses to give you copies of those things so that way you've got things you can look back. Mentally, it is hard to keep up with so much that's going on. To give you some instances of what, things that happen. As I said earlier, my daughter was a year and a half when she was going through aplastic anemia. And basically, with aplastic anemia, the bone marrow shuts down. So she had essentially no platelets in her system. We were having to transfuse those. Also, as an 18-month-old, they start teething. So we were in her room, and suddenly she started bleeding. And it took a few minutes to get to a point to realize that her platelet level was so low that as the tooth came in, there was nothing to stop the bleeding from her gums.
Yeah.
So those are aspects of things that you have to be able to work very closely with the nursing staff and the medical staff and working through those type things and trying to help support and diagnose those type situations. The other part of this is don't be afraid to ask questions of the doctors and nurses and those folks. And if you have problems, then you start talking to the hospital staff, patient advocates, patient representatives, social workers, those people who can also give you some aspects because you're dealing with personalities. And no matter what you do, you're going to have people that are very good and supportive. You've got people that are going to think they know the right answer. There's other people that will work with you and try and develop the right answers and the situations that you need. So it's going to take a little give and take and personal skills to work through that process. But do not be afraid to be directly involved in the healthcare process because that's most important in this type of situation, and to be able to do that very quickly because a lot of times there is very little time to make decisions.
Yeah. And I think that pretty much wraps everything up. We're going on 24 minutes, so we're pretty good on this.
As we said, this is really just an introduction. And to just get the ball rolling. As a sideline, it's one that I am what I consider pre-tired right now. So not having a regular job, but doing a lot of other things that I need to catch up on. But I also have time to be able to help and support some of these questions and hopefully provide some answers and support and help you find the direction you need to find.
Yeah. It's one... part of what I was going to add was use the people around you like us that are talking about stuff that we've been through. You never know what somebody's been through. So don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Even though we're not medical professionals, we still have a lot of experience that we can explain and help you understand what's going on.
And at least hopefully give you some different thoughts and opportunities to investigate on your own and find your own answers.
Definitely. So, for the CDH Warrior and
His dad.
this has been Monday's Monday. We'll see you next time. And I will see you on Thursday or Friday with We Survived This, Now What, our inaugural episode of that series. Have a great day.
Take care.